Hiya! Welcome to this, my 82nd episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled Expanding My Mystical Center, the pilot episode of Ryan Murphy's Glee turned up in the classic collection, I talk about the crazy ones, a bunch of movies, and marking 5 years of this project, you're in for a treat. It's my interview with Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast host Austin Titchener. Welcome to the show. He doesn't have it on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy. Around mid-May, I visited Mark Bailey, also known as Grill Wolf, sweet man, longtime friend, and friend of the pod in DC, and just missed taking along with the Grail Pack to Balticon, which is definitely on my bucket list. We kicked back and watched some shows, then I returned in time to audition for the Capitol Shakespeare production of The Merry Wives of Windsor, coming up July 20th through the 24th near the Heritage Center in Bismarck. And I'll be part of it. I play the ridiculous Dr. Keyes.
I'm French. Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
Something like that. I haven't been on stage in a little over a decade, so I'm really looking forward to this. Our director, Aaron Weichel, set this nutty romp in 1950s I Love Lucy style. Come on out if you're able to. It should be a hoot. And now, VideoFuzzy presents Fuzzy Feature. On disc 1301-1302, I found the pilot episode for Glee, featuring the football team dumping Christian Colfer in a dumpster. They were all waiting for a teacher to finish walking by, and they let him remove his pricey sweater before they all grabbed him and lifted him into the bin, and they were all just a little bit too good-natured about it, and he was way too accommodating, but the energy was that this was an interaction that had happened so often they wouldn't even understand the world in which it did not happen. Glee is Ryan Murphy's 2009 take on High School Musical, name-checked as a self-referential resurgent musical trope in 2006 movie. Chris' character, Kurt Hummel, along with Leah Michelle as Rachel, Kevin Kale as Artie, Amber Riley as Mercedes, and Jenna Ushkowitz as Tina, comprised the core group of students who signed up to be part of Spanish teacher Mr. Will Schuster's revitalized vision of show choir. In a fit of late-night inspiration, he renamed New Directions.
Are we not saying phrasing anymore?
New Directions. Pop hits and standards wove through the auditions and rehearsals, which included a group number from Guys and Dolls. The wheelchair-enabled Artie admonished to sit down and stop rocking the boat. They face personal and professional hurdles. Would-be show choir advisor Will's wife, Terry, seems like a nightmare, works like 5 hours a week at a Bed Bath and whatever, insists they buy a big lavish house on his tiny salary for the family they'll get started any moment now. The principal wants $60 a month to let him use the rehearsal space, and Will's also on the hook for that. Budgets are tight because Jane Lynch's Sue Sylvester gets absolutely anything she wants as advisor for her cheer team at the Cheerios. And there's this backstory where the gym teacher is crushing on Jayma Mays as Emma. He asks Will Schuster for a good word in exchange for some FaceTime to recruit some voices and leadership from the football team. This goes not great, and Emma's actually crushing on Will, but Finn, R.I.P. Corey Monteith is singing football Chuck. Finn realizes that time is short, this town is small and dumb, and one of the few ways out is on a dream. Finn defies his teammates, who we see bully at least 2, possibly 3 members of the Glee Club on screen. P.S. Who are these people who buy slushies, full-to-the-brim slushies, specifically to throw in the faces of show choir nobodies they pass in the hall? He defies his teammates and joins the group, at which point they really start to come alive. Vocally, they'd all been 5 egos fighting for the spotlight. Finn is determined to find their strengths and mold them into a team. For their part, Emma helps Will remember his passion for show choir, and those two have a sweet moment. A trip to a more established show choir gives them something to think about, but by the end they pulled a band together, and this ragtag half-dozen voices auto-tunes into the Mormon Tabernacle Choir singing Don't Stop Believin' by Journey, a song released almost 3 decades earlier and which has been used absolutely all over the place, including for Bill Clinton's presidential campaign in 1992. But lightning struck indeed, and we had beginnings of a show choir and a series that ran I stopped watching well before this, but ran through 2015 over 6 seasons. It's a Ryan Murphy production, so everything's got a backstory. In this case, Rachel, a girl, realized that she'd never stand out in show choir so long as Mr. Ryerson, Stephen Tobolowsky is the show choir advisor Sandy Ryerson, and his inappropriate fascination with choir boys, and gets him fired for touching one inappropriately. To be fair, we witness her witnessing the inappropriate touching on screen, so that actually checks out. It's actually better she spoke up. She's not homophobic. She herself has 2 dads. She's just ambitious. As she says, fixing a gold star after her name on the show choir sign-up sheet, being part of something special makes you special, right? Indeed. Side note, Will runs into Ryerson at Terry's Bed Bath & Beyond shop sheets and things. Far from mad, Ryerson said he's thrilled to be out of it, said he's selling weed now, making so much more than teaching. Apart from having mentioned Glee among Tobolowsky's dozens of appearances throughout my collection of media history, I had to freeze this. For barely a second, Ryerson holds up a throw pillow with a monkey motif that reads, "Everyone has a price."
Oh God, don't you love a good monkey?
Wow, the existence of that prop. I posted the screenshot to my Instagram. Enjoy. Cross Connection. It's unusual to feature 2 Ryan Murphy productions in a row, but there are so many arguments to be made for this production as a shadow centrality, primarily by the presence of Stephen Tobolowsky, as mentioned in episode 69. I just needed to take a moment front and center this. And it's nothing to do with what's his name from So You Think You Can Dance with the Stars or whatever. In fact, I commented last time about Glee's supporting lead Jayma Mays having appeared in both Studio 60 and 6 Feet Under, so her presence cements the series spot smack dab in the mystical center of my media collection. It's just interesting is all that between her and with Sarah Paulson of Studio 60 and Frances Conroy of 6 Feet Under, both recurring principles in Murph's American Horror Story anthologies, there's this shadow concentration to explore. I feel like I've celebrated the presence of Evan Peters, Sarah Paulson, Frances Conroy, Angela Bassett, Dylan McDermott, Billy Porter, and Jessica Lange every time I've encountered them anywhere. The vibe is dark. Horror is right there in the name, though be fair, 6 Feet Under isn't exactly the color yellow either. Murph is an endlessly creative and powerful voice. I'm drawn to his stories, primarily Nip Tuck, American Horror Stories, his American Crime Stories, Feud, Betty and Joan, Glee, The New Normal, and oh, wow, the down-to-the-floor astonishing creation that was Pose. He says, I've never seen a minute of Scream Queens, and his 911 productions actively repelled me, though they were co-created by Tim Minear of X-Files and Angel fame, and did cast Peter Krause, another direct tie to 6 Feet Under, so they're probably better than I thought. Either way, Murph is an American treasure and enjoys an honored place near the center of my collection as well. If I trace something to a Ryan Murphy production, it's most of its way to Studio 6 Feet Under anyway, but it's good to take a moment and acknowledge it. Murph connections include the X-Men, the Mayor, Thelma and Louise, They Pull In, Drop Dead Diva, and Hot in Cleveland, Madonna's Truth or Dare, Claws, Dirt. I mean, Dirt was practically there already with Courtney Cox co-starring in some obscure 90s art house indie piece with Matthew Perry of Studio 60. But yeah, there's Joan Collins recurring in American Horror Story gets me to everyone ever involved in Dynasty. Larry Hagman's recurring in Nip Tuck gets me to everyone ever involved in Dallas. Melissa Gilbert in Nip Tuck gets me to everyone on Little House on the Prairie and everyone Michael Landon ever worked with. I mean, it's just new worlds. Just how would I even Studio Murphy Under? I may have to massage that some, but if I track anything to a Ryan Murphy production, it's understood to be mystically centered. Congratulations, Murph. 82 episodes in, you're established as a third chakra in my media collection. Well done. I think that was officially a smattering of applause. I mentioned up there I watched a lot of movies for this one. I won't be doing this for all of them, but I was intrigued by adding more TCM movies to my current collection, how they fared in my studio Sex with Murphy challenge. No, gonna keep working on that. I added a Korean film from 1960 I'm sure would pose a challenge, but from 1933's Queen Christina, I can track title character Greta Garbo with Robert Sterling in Two-Faced Woman, Sterling in Murder, She Wrote with Tom Selleck, and in Friends with already mentioned him up there, Matthew Perry of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. That's 4 steps, and Murder, She Wrote is pretty much a mall, but Tom Selleck represented a crossover with his own show, Magnum P.I., so it seemed like a fair call for it. The Korean language film, The Housemaid, is an even closer connection, actually. I can get the son in the piece, Zoom Ki-an, to his appearance with Michael Lombardi in Last Nights, to Stephen Pasquale of 6 Feet Under in Rescue Me. Nothing wrong with my IMDb game. Boom.
Diving into my classic collection.
I know there are a lot of fascinating connections I could trace for this set, but I want to get to my interview, so tearing through my classic VHS and DVD collection discs 1301 to 1325, I found what stood out most about this set was how chaotic it ultimately was. Lots of little scraps of lots of different shows all over the place. For example, on discs 1313, 1318, and 1319, I've got Tim Roth in 2007 horror flick called Funny Games that might have been a brilliant suspense thriller home invasion analog to 2017's entry Keep Watching, but the screaming bowl of metal music through the opening sequence was just so annoying. And on disc 1301, I found a first season episode of Drop Dead Diva featuring Greg Harrison as a CEO who was going a little eccentric until he had a stroke while giving testimony in open court. It was sort of the reverse of Eli Stone. Maybe we get the fun, if self-destructively quirky person the medical attention they so clearly desperately need and challenge them more on the whimsical chaos to which they're subjecting the people in their lives. Once he recovered, he was able to reconcile with his son, which was sweet. I encountered several catalog premieres this time, first appearances of shows in this effort, including Comedy Central's animated reality-show-based sitcom Drawn Together. A third season episode made an appearance where the gang was going to the mall and evangelical Christian Princess Clara thinks she was left behind in the rapture. Also new for this set, the pilot episode of Glee made an appearance. I talked more about that one up there. Fun. I needed to highlight the appearance of Vampire Diaries in this set. Kate Bush is enjoying a moment with the use of Running Up That Hill in a recent episode of Stranger Things, and pilot episode of Vampire Diaries featured a not remotely terrible cover of that song by Placebo. Track it down. I included a link to their version in my show notes. Oh, and a 5th season episode of Alias showed up in this set featuring Amy Acker, more usually in my collection as Fred in the Angel series. While I'm on the subject of people showing up places, I found Marquez Shepard in an episode of Warehouse 13. That was pretty cool. I also found an episode of Medium in his recurring homicidal Doc Charles Walker character. Very dark. Matt Freier's cryptozoologist Jim Taker recurred in a chilling 3rd season episode of Eureka, and I found an early episode by Kelly Thorne in Prison Break as Mahoney's wife. She more often to be found in this collection in Rescue Me. Then on disc 1307, I found this sweet moment in Mad Men where Christina Hendricks' office manager, Joan, reached out and helped Elizabeth Moss' copywriter Peggy find a roommate in a move to Manhattan. Peggy was looking at it as a 2 girls against the world scenario, and Joan pointed out that it should be an adventure. Look for someone who's seeking to share her joy and freedom in the city, she said. Talking to one applicant, Carla Gallo showed up as Karen Erickson, working a few floors below as a travel agent who was bright and bubbly and so impressed that Peggy had her own office. Her face was sparking a real memory for me. A quick IMDb search told me why. I remembered her way more as Daisy Wick in Bones. It was part of the quirky rotation of lab assistants replacing Eric Milligan as Zach Addy. Daisy ended up being Dr. Sweet's love interest in that show, if I recall correctly. Fun energy. Along with guest appearances, shows occasionally open opportunities for regular cast members to break out talents they don't always get to showcase. Mad Men let characters sing, dance, play music in the Old Kentucky Home episode I highlighted last time. And on disc 1306 in this set in Grey's Anatomy, a series famous for award-winning musical selections, a 3rd season episode titled Staring at the Sun featured Chandra Wilson as Dr. Bailey on the phone with her infant son Tucker singing God Bless the Child a cappella. Her voice brimming with every bit of mother love that she can convey to the child that she can't, at that moment, be home with in an episode that focused like a laser on working moms versus stay-at-home moms, supporting the notion that everyone's probably doing the best they can in situations they're in. Disc 1310 was another rare instance of Studio 60 and 6 Feet Under episodes appearing on the same disc. The second season premiere of 6 Feet Under featured 30-something Michael C. Hall naked and jacked. The character was feeling insecure in that moment. I'm here to tell him he need never feel that. No. Oh, and this was fun. While exploring that title in IMDb, I very randomly clicked on an actor who played a bit part oncologist in that episode. And I was this episode years old when I discovered that there was a TV movie version of Fargo produced in 2003 featuring Edie Falco as Marge Gunderson. Holy God, I love this project. I discover shows and things I never would otherwise. That's just so amazing to me, truly. Also recommended to me the indie film In a World. Maybe I'll make it a double feature if I get a chance. Really looking forward to it. Speaking of, in disc 1309, I found a trailer for the 2006 movie Bobby, a star-studded dramatic recreation of the hours preceding Robert Kennedy's assassination in 1968. Did we know this was a thing? I'm not aware of ever having heard of it. It starred Anthony Hopkins, Demi Moore, Lawrence Fishburne, William H. Macy. I feel I should try tracking it down. The involvement of Freddie Rodriguez makes it a direct link to my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge. No. Studio Murphy Under. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be the Studio Murphy Under challenge, and it's plenty of that. Anyway, with Freddie Rodriguez, I don't often link through him, so it feels potentially significant. On disc 1315, I encountered the second season premiere of Sons of Anarchy on FX. Adam Arkin and Henry Rollins joined the cast as father-son business owners setting up shop in charming California. They're also members of the League of American Nationalists, a white separatist movement that targets Sam Crow bikers for, I am certain there were compelling reasons. Arkin and Rollins was genius casting. They're talented actors who can present these roles as considered complex characters, but they are sufficiently known quantities as human beings on this planet. There's no point that anyone's going to suspect they have any resonance with the points of view that they're espousing. There's not a lot of great ways to present white nationalism on screen. It's always gross, but when it's required by the story you're telling, Sons of Anarchy found probably one of the few okay ways to do it. Speaking of gritty FX dramas, disc 1314 showed up with a significant payoff on Lou's fifth season marriage to Candy and Rescue Me. After this little chip he made off with 20 grand of Lou's money, he wrote her off as a lying, cheating whore. Then, when she came back, she waited for him outside Ladder 62, swearing she was reformed, begging for forgiveness with thousands of dollars she said was from her uncle's passing. Lou sniffs a new scam, but sees her bluff and marries her. Meanwhile, everyone's telling Lou to call the police, kick her to the curb, jail her silly butt, but Lou's seen all the money and it's real enough. He takes advantage of the fact that she's trying to convince him she's all in the up and up now, setting up a joint checking account and so forth, when suddenly he pulls the trigger. Lou has been digging furiously for information about this barnacle, and he's found enough to tie her to a scam of a still alive man she claimed with her late uncle and who wants to know where all his money is. Lou found out her real name and discovered open warrants, and cleared out their accounts to recoup her theft plus interest. She can settle up with anyone else once the police are done with her. Lou played her back so masterfully, I just had to applaud the writing we were witnessing this season. Yeah, the cast was crowded. Yeah, there were some weird side plots. Go ahead and track down the episode titled Carrot and why that's the title. It's wow, this show sometimes. But when they went for it, they really made up for a lot of that kind of stuff. Wrapping this segment, Madonna's tour in support of her Confessions on a Dance Floor release took her to Wembley Stadium in August of 2007, where they recorded a concert video, which was subsequently broadcast on Bravo. On the knife's edge of 50 at the time, Madonna powered through a catalog spanning decades, mind-melding choreography that included parkour through the audience and dozens of costume changes in a set list of hits old and new. I loved Hung Up, Sorry, I loved Live to Tell, I loved Erotica. I loved La Isla Bonita. She used her concert as an opportunity to highlight the devastation wrought by HIV and AIDS on the African continent, reporting in 2007 that 12 million children were orphaned by the disease each year. That number has since increased to 15.4 million each year as of last year. Also, more than a third, 35% of all orphans worldwide live in sub-Saharan Africa. Wow.
Checking out my current collection.
In my current direct-to-DVD collection, I mentioned last episode I wanted to take some time to just kick back and consume a bunch of media. Well, that is, in fact, what I did since posting the last one. I watched dozens of movies I'd piled up on Medco TV, boiled that thing down to the base level we keep for game shows and news, etc. I pulled up the 3-part Hugh Laurie adaptation of Agatha Christie's Why Didn't They Ask Evans, the hilarious Irish sitcom Mrs. Brown's Boys, dug into the first few episodes of Shakespeare and Hathaway, and that's just fun, and finally watched Encanto on Disney Plus, etc. And I'd likely be continuing my paddle upstream, except for the fact that it did look just a little bit possible that if I buckled down and focused, I might manage a real episode to celebrate my 5th year doing this, instead of a bare interview special, which, don't get me wrong, I'm chomping at the bit to get my conversation with Austin Tichenor here in a few minutes. I recorded it in March. It was a Zoom call. It was the first one I'd participated in, so learning curve, and my recording of it did require a bit of love and sound engineering, but this podcast is primarily about the progress I'm making in cataloging my media collection, so the fact that I completed my current classic cataloging in what felt like the nick of time to mark 5 years of doing this was awesome. The interview with Austin is just icing on a cake I'm already quite pleased with. So, cutting into this layer of it, I'm going to start with, oh wow, I watched, and you can confirm with my blog, so many movies. I think Turner Classic Movies was on Elizabeth Taylor Jag, so I watched a bunch of her work either for the first time in a long while. Her 1973 work, Night Watch, seemed like a cross between Rear Window and Gaslight. I twigged early on that her hubby and best friend were sleeping together. They got her calling the police for seeing things, thinking she'd witnessed a murder in the house across the way, insisting on it, more or less establishing her as a hysterical, unreliable witness, putting her late husband's things where she was likely to find them, dismissing the help and then asking her why she'd done it, worrying to mutual acquaintances that she might OD, and then her faithless friend offering her pills crushed up in her drink. Her nightmare sequences were jarring. And honestly, this movie would have been like 20 minutes long if they just brought her across to look at the abandoned house herself after her initial report, but no matter. I liked it. The final standoff they had over there, while strangely effective, seemed unlikely, though it was a nice confrontation in a story that was just demanding it. Then I saw her 1960s Butterfield 8 being arch and brash and clever. I didn't like it, though I'm certain that Stockard Channing had seen this movie at least once. By the end, Gloria was doing anything she could to get out of that movie, and I sympathized. Oh, and this was the set that gave me an opportunity to watch some movies I really ought to have by now, and I finally watched her as Maggie in 1958's Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. I felt Skipper was a better match for Brick than Maggie. Happy Pride Month, but oh well. I ran into Big Daddy Burl Ives at a scrap of the 1964 stop-motion animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special while cataloging this set, and I thought subjecting Burl Ives, who absolutely knows from singing, to those bratty little kid singers had to be a special kind of torture for them. Oh, God. I caught Jack Lemmon's hapless office stooge Ted Crisp, C.C. Baxter, an insurance adjuster with a sweet little nearby flat a handful of mid-level managers have come to consider their very own home away from home. In 1960s, The Apartment, these breathtakingly entitled jagoffs schedule their faithless trysts while their wives are none the wiser, and Baxter either works late or stands out in the cold waiting for them to finish up so he can use his home, all in service of maybe moving up the corporate ladder. Despite the obvious foot traffic, his neighbors attribute all the noisy lovemaking in the apartment to sweet, wide-eyed, always chaste and hard-working Baxter, who's a big blush but puts up with it all as a strategy for getting ahead. It's a little annoying because he's falling for Shirley MacLaine as Brian Kubelik, elevator operator for the firm, and she's still dealing with her one-time love interest, Fred McMurray, as Jeff Sheldrake. Jeff is the reason she can't pursue Baxter, but he also won't leave his wife of at least 10 years, so she's in lover's limbo. Jeff is starting to offer her money for their time together, making her really hate herself and her choices. When Jeff brings her to Baxter's apartment, she's so unhappy with her life and what her family thinks of her that she takes pills to kill herself. Baxter finds her there, gets his neighbors involved in reviving her and getting her stabilized. While the strategy works, Baxter gets his promotion. He's now working for Jeff directly, and under the circumstances, that does not work for him. But when Fran finds out that he's turned in his notice and why, she realizes that Baxter's had feelings for her all along and goes to him. Aww. Like I said, I consumed a lot of media for this one, so it's time to turn this over to a lightning round. Harper is mostly Paul Newman walking around handsoming for a couple of hours. Not gonna lie, you can absolutely market that, but so much of mid-1960s is dumb and it ended super weird. Ragdoll on AMC Plus is garbage crime porn along the lines of Seven, but way less likely. Following a murder by immolation, that killer ended up as part of frozen Frankencorp set up across from the lead investigator's flat. There's a flower delivery that blows up an investigative office. A detective has to get a tattoo in order to conduct an inquiry. We've got police accusing witnesses of TikTok Marxism and one operative snarking, "Stop me if this is too podcast." Gladly. For 2004's Hotel Rwanda with Don Cheadle, I had zero expectations, just hoped to learn a bit of history I'd never had much of a window on. I feel like I did, sort of, though what carries further than anything is whoever controls your media filters your whole reality, and we just always gotta be aware of this. For Spike Lee's 1992 work, Malcolm X, again, films I should have really watched by now, Denzel Washington was killing it in the title role alongside Angela Bassett. Lee pulls together a seriously evocative storytelling. There's no denying it, and it's interesting watching the sort of cross-currents at work in society today have deep roots in cultural history. Also interesting was watching this movie with its name-check referent 2000's Bamboozled so recently in my rear view. And watching 2020's Antebellum there in the mix was truly fascinating. In the words of William Faulkner, the past is never dead. It's not even the past. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it because my jaw just dropped at the reveal. This movie represents some astonishing world building. Then I encountered presentations of The Raven, Hotel Artemis, Den of Thieves, Gigi, Carmen Jones, Brigadoon, The Thief of Baghdad, and Citizen Kane. Oh wow, yep, finally saw that. Executive Suite, Queen Christina, and The Housemaid. Seriously, Chekhov's rat poison, am I right? I have thoughts, like, watching Sci-Fi's rebroadcast of Knives Out reminded me I wanted to order Harlan Thrombey's coffee mug. And, oh hey, yeah, during the strip club scene in Den of Thieves, that song, Our Demons by the Glitch Mob, circa 2014, was really cool. I added that to my collection. I was intrigued by 1940s The Thief of Baghdad set in the Middle East, casting no actual Middle Easterners in the show. I mean, zero. And Otto Premier's Carmen Jones, starring Dorothy Dandridge, Harry Belafonte, the whole cast people of color singing Bizet's classic opera with contemporized lyrics. I thought Beyonce's was fresher, but this was a strong reimagination of the story. I mentioned Ragdoll up there, gross. In other television, I take back what I said about AMC's Better Call Saul. Their takedown of Patrick Fabian as Howard Hamlin, that was amazing. Never any guarantee that their plan was going to work. It was wow. And on the CW, Kung Fu is leaning into its Buffy analogs a lot this season, but since Buffy was an incredible show, I'm just enjoying the story they're telling, however ridiculous it seems to be sometimes.
What I've been watching.
I'm burning through this pretty fast because I want to get to the good stuff, like Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm going to work as spoiler-free as possible, but if you're still planning to see it, skip ahead. This movie so benefits from knowing as little about it as possible ahead of actually seeing it. Still here? Just so we understand each other, the experience improves appreciably when you come in fresh. Comments in 3, 2, 1... It's all on you now. Everything Everywhere All at Once is mostly a different way of looking at the world, which is probably the most wonderful thing about it. I put it in the same category as Being John Malkovich, or The Science of Sleep, or a heartwarming David Lynch film, which is only slightly less probable. There's a music video R.E.M. did called Imitation of Life, where the whole video is about 20 seconds of film viewed from dozens of different perspectives, and that's the energy this film called mine for me. Yeoh plays Evelyn Wang. Her daughter, Joy Joy, played by Stephanie Hsu, is dating Halle Metal as Becky Sreger. Kehoi Kwan is her husband, Wayman, serves divorce papers a few hours before the big party tonight, celebrating 20 years of business at their laundromat, same day her father, James Hong's Gong Gong, arrives from China. However, Evelyn, unfortunately, is down to her very last spoon, just putting her information together for her tax audit with Jamie Lee Curtis as Deidre Bobidra, and trying to figure out what to tell her father about her daughter's girlfriend. She doesn't notice Wayman's divorce papers, or that he's suddenly acting a little strangely, parkouring around the laundromat and chomping lip gloss. But at the IRS meeting, this version of her husband, I'll call him 00 Wayman, zips an app on her phone, a Bluetooth in her ear, tells her to switch the shoes she's wearing to opposite feet and imagine herself in the janitor's closet. At this point, you know as much as Evelyn does, but these odd, out-of-the-ordinary behaviors fuel everything's version of an infinite improbability drive, where if you do something that would be out of character for you in your current reality, you can verse walk to an alternate version of yourself, and if it's really unusual, you can verse walk to other versions of humanity and entirely other ways of being. Evelyn discovers she has a preternatural talent for verse walking and exploring these new various worlds, variations of herself, different ways her life could be. Evelyn realizes the most important thing she needs to be is present and centered and focused on the people in her life, in particular, her daughter. I experienced this movie's art and will be watching it again in an environment with a frame advance option because there's a full minute of this movie that's going to benefit from that. The existence of this work is astonishing, and the more people who see it, the better our world is going to be. So, get on that. I mentioned my trip to DC to meet up with Mark. On the flight out, I watched Free Guy, a movie centered on Ryan Reynolds as Blue Shirt Guy, a non-player character in Free City, a Grand Theft Auto-style video game. He falls for the avatar of one of the game developers, Jodie Comer, as Millie, and using a stolen pair of sunglasses, he thinks the sunglass people are the heroes, but they're just gamers and not that heroic, figures out how to level up. Millie's playing because she knows her code is in there somewhere, stolen from her, and Joe Keery is completely in love with her keys, stolen by Taika Waititi as Tsunami Chief Antoine. Antoine is developing a sequel to Free City called, imaginatively enough, Free City 2.
Groundbreaking.
But despite the entire structures in place, the rollout is super buggy and bad and user hostile because Tuan is one of those big picture guys who doesn't know how to actually do things. Millie and Keys developed substructural code for Free City and suspects Tuan's been piggybacking on their work throughout, but can't prove it. Millie keeps just about finding the secret, but a glitch in the programming makes Blue Shirt Guy the exact person she needs to hook up with if she's going to prove her claim. Spoilers, there is a plot twist. It's a fun show, goofy, kind of the Lego Movie, but video games, and Ryan Reynolds is never not fun. The trip itself was fantastic, far too short. We took in some sights around the Capitol, the Mall, and the Museum of Natural History. Because we are us, and this is what we do, Mark and I consumed a bunch of media. We took in the Season 5 finale of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, then followed Sarah Michelle Gellar to her work with the inimitable Robin Williams and the Crazy Ones. I have to say, taking in this 2013 David E. Kelley production of Chicago ad execs run amok was so delightful, and I couldn't have had better company. Robin Williams is Simon Roberts, CEO of Roberts, Lewis, a small, scrappy ad firm in Chicago with a core staff of 2 creatives and underutilized assistant. We got Buffy as Simon's daughter Sydney, the other Roberts, marketing strategist for the firm. Simon is goofy and has a strong instinct for messaging. I'd say insightful, but his interactions with the staff suggest a kind of flightiness that would never play in running a business, but makes for good comedy. The creatives, for instance, Zachary and the other one, Andrew, are modeled on a cycling Smothers Brothers Mom Always Liked You Best routine, but they're sufficiently self-aware to make it work. Simon's a bit clueless. There's definitely favoritism, but his obvious favorite is Sydney, even with her having been born a girl. Creatives, Andrew and Zachary, are flash and substance, workhorse and show horse, but they're both really talented, and this tiny, desperately under-resourced firm is handling McDonald's? I guess. I mean, if these people weren't fictional, they'd be unbelievably talented. They went from Sydney's Wendy's idea for a giant self-pouring coffee pot 3 stories high to a physically improbable practical structure of an outdoor swimming pool's worth of who exactly brewed all that coffee and how long ago? Self-pouring into a giant cup, and when the wind picked up, it blew all that coffee all over everyone having somehow forgotten Chicago is windy, despite the product is called Windy City Coffee. Disaster, outrage, my dry cleaning. The free Windy City Coffee distribution was a bust. People ran screaming, pushing and shoving each other out of the way to get to safety. Per the local news, it was a public relations nightmare, until Simon recut the footage as a disaster film and tagged Windy City Coffee dangerously good. Brilliant. This unlikely pairing, Robin and Sarah, Mork and Buffy, it was hard to understand how that was going to work, but I needed to get this DVD set because while short-lived, David E. Kelley unlocked, distilled, and then bottled that beautiful energy into these 22 episodes. I've said while it's among his last work, it's not his best work, but Robin Williams was completely there, hilariously funny, open to pathos, finding unexpected depths in what could possibly be the stakes for this show? If a tiny ad agency went under, he'd retire, she'd go work someplace else. But there was a lot of good done here. One of the outtakes, Simon asked Sydney where she learned to drive like that, and she said, Sunnydale. Delivery was perfect. Chef's kiss. Since DC was throwing 100-degree temps for most of my visit, Mark and I took advantage of the relatively chill temps in his basement and watched the first disc in the 3-disc set, adorably subtitled The Complete First Season, as opposed to, well, I mean, it only ran for 1 season altogether. We also switched over to his Amazon Prime account occasionally to watch Amazon's Kids in the Hall reboot. While it's only been 20 to 30 years since the original show went off the air, it's clearly been 40 to 50 years for these players, but at least the first couple episodes were hilarious. It looked like the original theme song was re-recorded, or at least reshot with the original band, Shadowy Men from a Shadowy Planet, with clips from the original series openers reshot with what looked in some cases to be some of the same people. To establish the premise, Scott Thompson played a creepy hippie selling a VHS copy of the Kids in the Hall movie Brain Candy at a garage sale for a loonie, which turns out they finally broke even. Mark McKinney and Dave Foley reprised their boardroom characters, suggesting Brain Candy had been a co-production with Satan. McKinney asked if Satan was also responsible for this reboot. Foley said, "Close, sir. It's Amazon." Cut to Bellini at a headstone unearthing the kids with a backhoe, and ta-da! It's the Cathys sending the last fax at AT Love. It's drunken fighting over imaginary girlfriends. It's an incredibly naughty Zoom meeting. It is an upscale dining experience featuring the most adorably tiny pie. It's a bank heist sketch that ends with, I think, Kevin and Bruce jumping up and down buck naked in an alleyway. I may have actively blocked that memory from forming. Yep, there's adult themes and full frontal nudity, that's frankly pretty brave for this troupe, and there's some serious potential for the show to go from Kids in the Hall to You Kids Get Off My Lawn. But if you've got an Amazon Prime account, it's there to be streamed, and from what I saw anyway, would recommend.
Whatever you're watching, wherever you be, stream up the stream with me.
In actual streaming, I wanted to highlight what I was finding on BritBox, because as I mentioned them earlier, but Shakespeare and Hathaway are fun. A detective team forms when a scam victim bride hires a low-energy private investigator, and with his master of disguise's office assistant, exposes her scam artist groom, only for him to turn up dead, and she's taking the fall for it. Her quick thinking and their cooperation nabs the right whodunit in the nick of time. They finally make a great team, and a partnership is struck, her name being Shakespeare and his being Hathaway. Other names in the piece reference Shakespeare and his Elizabethan milieu, Sebastian, Viola, Marlowe, Falstaff, but it's all go in Stratford-on-Avon. I thought this piece was much older than it is, but it premiered in 2018. So far, I'm loving it. As for Hugh Laurie's 3-part take on Agatha Christie's Why Didn't They Ask Evans, I thought the pace was somewhat meandering, but there are good beats of suspense throughout. I'm not clear why the corpse would have this particular question on his lips, but that's likely just going to remain part of the mystery, and the puzzle itself is a good chase around for these delightful characters and their heroic efforts evoking the time period. Well done. In other streaming views, I caught the first episode of the Ipcris Files on AMC+, which, yeah, I enjoyed that. A nice Cold War spy thriller, good puzzle, smart people figuring stuff out, very Rubicon. I liked it. Looking forward to seeing more. Oh, quick, wanted to break in here to recommend a podcast to which I was recently introduced. She Done It by Carolyn Crampton. She'll be making an appearance in an upcoming episode of All About Agatha, and she came highly recommended by that podcast co-host, Kemper Donovan. So I subscribed and gave a listen. I think she does an absolutely fantastic job. Deep dive explorations of authors, characters, stories, mysteries, all wrapped in the glow of the golden age of detective fiction. I learned so much about some of my favorite authors and their creations. I've only just started listening. Check it out. Carolyn Crampton's She Done It. Because she absolutely did. Cheers. And now...
Call this meeting to order.
Calling up a little old business. 5 years ago, I had a phone. I'd just finished transferring my final box of VHS tapes. I'd also twigged to the notion that I could record shows directly from my DVR and continue my media archiving project digitally. I had this idea that every week I'd catalog a bunch of my discs and I'd talk about what I was finding on them with a little feature highlight of something I'd found there and progress along as I went. This immediately got out of hand. I worked all week, so cataloging was slow, and I gave up my whole weekend every weekend trying to quick catalog a bunch of stuff, quick write about it, and then record and edit something, often not making much progress at all. My first episode featured 8 discs in my classic collection and 4 discs in my current one. For another, the split was 13 and 1. I shifted to a goal of every other week, but that was also too ambitious. It feels like it took me too long to set the pace by the cataloging rather than the other way around, but 5 years along, cataloging whatever I archive for my current collection ahead of cataloging 25 discs in my classic collection whenever that happens. I'm learning to be patient with myself. I'd gotten a few done ahead of this, but over the course of this project, I've cataloged from disc 229 to disc 1325 in my classic collection, more than 1,000 discs, along with 456 discs in my current collection, representing about 7.5 solid months worth of media. And I haven't been focusing on this so much, but earlier this year I crossed 10,000 downloads, which is a lovely milestone to mark on this auspicious occasion. I'm sure I'm only responsible for a few dozen of those myself, and I'm always pleased to see any activity at all. My hope is that you're enjoying this, my video fuzzies, and if there's anything special you want to hear about, all the ways to contact me are listed at the end. Video of. But I promised you a treat for this, my 5th year anniversary special, and I will be getting to that right now. In episode 80, back in February, I highlighted a couple episodes of Close to Home, one of them featuring actor and podcast host Austin Titchener, and I was able to connect with him for VideoFuzzy's first ever Zoom interview. It was back in March, so you'll notice a few iffy verb tenses, and for sure check the website listings for performance schedules for Reduced Shakespeare Company performances. I've since been made aware of some updates. I'll include a link in my show notes. And I'd say it, but this whole episode has been ado, so without any further ado, I give you my chat with Austin Titchener. I'm here with Austin Titchener as he tell you 1/3 of the Reduced Shakespeare Company and host of the Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast. Welcome, sir. From whence have I the pleasure of this Zoom call? Where in the world is Austin Titchener?
Well, at the moment, he's in his basement office in the suburbs of Chicago, but actually it's kind of an exciting time because we're about to finally, after 2 years, get back to rehearsing in person for possible gigs in April of 2022. So we're excited by that. So I'm actually leaving town very quickly. So I'm glad to be able to talk to you now.
Oh, for sure. I want to thank you very much for your time. January, you were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for the Shakespeare Theater Association. You're fresh from some traveling, coming up on a new project in California. I just wanted to welcome you to VideoFuzzy. And I mentioned you're in my media collection. In February, I featured you turned up in an episode of Close to Home in 2005, and that was in episode 80. If people want to remember what I had to say about that. It was as you say, a smallish role, but it gave you some craft to employ, and as you mentioned, it was one that stood out
for you. How you came to be cast as Don Cook, tell me about that.
Well, it stands out in my memory for a couple of reasons. One, I'm amazed that anybody is still watching it close to home. Because even I'm not sure anybody was watching it then. So that was strange. But it came to me in a weird way because it was one of the casting directors for it were Janet Gilmore and Megan McConnell. Gilmore McConnell, as they were known, and Janet and I went to college together. We were in the drama department at University of California, Berkeley, and I wrote a musical in college. She was in it. She was a fantastic actor, and she became a casting director and got me my first jobs in television. In fact, helped me get my first agent. So Janet was sort of instrumental in my career, and although I immediately got typed as doctors and lawyers,
guys in ties.
She would frequently bring me in for parts that weren't that. So on Felicity, for instance, I don't know whether Felicity has been part of your deep dive or binges, but there was a character called Javier, a very flamboyantly gay owner of the Dina DeLuca coffee shop where Felicity worked.
Oh, fun.
And he was played by Ian Gomez, who is a Second City alum. And my wife was a Second Citizen, also in Second City. In fact, Ian used to be married to India Vardalos of My Big Fat Greek Wedding fame.
Of course.
Ian and India hosted our baby shower when we first moved to Los Angeles. So we were friends.
Yeah.
And for the first season or two of Felicity, he was dating some guy who was played by an extra. But then in the season they called me, they were looking to actually have Javier get married. So they needed an actor to play his husband, and Janet brought me in to play him. So I wasn't playing an asshole lawyer, a pessimistic doctor. I was just playing a nice guy.
Uh-huh.
And that was a huge, great change for me. And then this was an even bigger change because I rarely got called in to do anything remotely emotional.
Yeah.
So all the stuff I was doing, as doctors and lawyers were to be a pessimist or an antagonist. And usually I could say words like semen and exculpatory without giggling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I got these kinds of parts. But I never got really even auditions to play grieving spouses or serious husbands. So that was a nice change for me. I kind of left it the opportunity. The other thing that was weird about it was that Janet brought me in very quickly. That's another reason why she called me, because she knows what I can do and she knows this will happen quickly.
Oh, yeah.
She said, look, they've been shooting this season. They're in the first season. I think this episode has already been shot, and they realize they need new extra scenes.
Oh, okay.
So I need to cast this like today, and if we cast you, then you need to go over for fittings like immediately tomorrow and shoot it soon. I went, great, good. So I got it. I mean, I cast it, I read it, and I can't remember whether she cast me or whether I had to be approved by somebody else. But anyway, I got the gig. And so that's how I got it. So it sticks out in my mind like that. It was a role that I'd never gotten, and it happened really quickly.
Well, you kind of answered the question that I had, which was to try to find Don's voice. Which was, were you able to even get into table reads? But it sounds like they had already gone all through that. I mean, what everybody else was doing in that episode, it felt like they had the idea for their character. But where you came in, and it did stand out, was that you're right across from it's Jennifer Finnegan, right? Jennifer Finnegan as the prosecutor, Annabeth Chase, and they wove those two scenes in really well. Because it's surprising that it's like, oh, we're just padding out the show. It's like, you're not padding out the show, you're making it watchable.
and I don't, in their defense, I don't think they were trying to pad it. I think they realized, oh, wait, they need to find that personal connection to this case.
And it really added that. I thought that wove it in really well.
Well, that's good. Yeah, there was no voice to find, really. I mean, usually in roles like this, I have to find myself in the part and in the words that they give me to say. And the other challenge for me is that, like, I'm not a crier. I'm not one of those actors who cry on a dime.
No.
So, whatever I was going to do, it wasn't going to be a full meltdown thing because I thought, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And, that doesn't feel right. I mean, this guy's trying to hold it together. And so that's the challenge, is to hold it together and not lose it.
Mm-hmm.
The story was all great until we actually got around to shooting.
Uh-huh. And
that's when it became memorable in a quite different way.
What happened with the shooting of it?
Well, I get in there, and it's and I forget whether, I think I was being directed by the guy who was directing the episode they were currently working on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what episode mine
It was like your stuff, or the suburban prostitution stuff was already done in the can. They were working on the next one, but they told you were in, like, already somebody else's story. You were.
Yeah, and they were finding time to squeeze me in.
Wow.
Like let's squeeze this in right before lunch. And so they brought me in, and they just did a rehearsal, which is, I mean, you saw the scene. It's just what's her name? Jennifer.
Jennifer Finney.
Annabeth.
Yeah, Annabeth.
And I just sitting across her desk from each other. So there's no blocking or anything. In fact, the biggest, we ran through it, and you don't really give much at these kinds of camera rehearsals anyway.
Uh-huh.
And so, we read the scene, and every time I was saying my line, Jennifer had her phone and was just sort of looking at it. Like she wasn't even looking at me. and so I was kind of thrown back by that. I was like, oh shit, okay, I'm acting by myself here. And then we go through the rehearsal, and the director goes, well, you're going to give me more on the day, right? It's like, dude, what?
I've got zero connection with that. I mean, it's me, her, and her phone.
Yeah, it's me, her, and her phone. Oh, by the way, I'm coming in to do you a solid. I mean, I'm getting paid, but like I'm helping you fix a previous episode.
You're gonna give me more, huh? Oh my God, okay.
It was very odd, and then we didn't get the shot before lunch, or maybe we got her. I think they shot over.
Yeah, over the shoulder shot. Yep.
And so they got her before lunch, and then they said, "All right, we got a break for lunch. We'll pick this up right after lunch." Well, that meant, oh God damn it, I got to stay in this mood.
Yeah.
I've got to, because I can't just throw it off and then come back in and get into this serious depressed moment.
Yeah.
I have to stay in that mood over lunch. And so over lunch, I walked over to Janet's office, and I did say, hey, could you come read off camera with me? Because I'm getting nothing from your star.
Yeah.
And Janet's an old friend, enough of a friend where I could say that to her without risk of getting fired.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, and then we went back and we shot it, after lunch. And I still didn't get any sort of direction or anything from the director. And she was still looking at her phone, when she didn't have a line to look at me. And the only thing I remember, so that look, like there's no blocking. Who was sitting at a desk. But the major bit of blocking was that look up to her. She says, if there's anything I can do, and I just kind of look up and spear her with that look of,
yes.
you tell me you'll do whatever it takes, whatever the line.
No, it was, dead on.
And that kind of move, just with your eyes, is like running down stage center on stage. I mean, it's a really big, on camera, that's a very big sort of gesture, and I didn't want to I never want to be too big on camera, but anyway, that was a stern look, and actually, the fact that she was barely looking at me anyway, gave me that fueled, I have to say, that look.
I actually feel like that would, because it's like, I need to convey to you justice for my late wife, and you're not even looking at me. That.
Are these daggers I seen before shooting out of my eyes? Yeah.
Well, it kind of talks a little bit about when you did the first season walk-on in West Wing, where you had to convincingly object to arts funding and also even mentioning arts funding in the State of the Union address. And it's like, wow, how do you find that voice?
I'm always able to find the opposing point of view, and I just enjoy the irony of that. So, like, I'm giving a shit about funding for the arts. But also I know that, it's like volleyball, or it's like basketball. In order to make Richard Schiff look good, I gotta throw him the ball.
Exactly.
And I gotta pop it to him in a way that he can get it back to me.
Oh, yeah, where he can, over the net, and he just spiked that thing. Obviously, he's scripted, and he's scripted by Aaron Sorkin, which is, like, already just a spike. So, yeah, it was an excellent response. Obviously, he didn't have to come up with it, but you handed him that really well. Now, I would have thought, there was a time in my life when I would have thought sitting across from Dylan Walsh would have been, in Nip Tuck, would have been having made it. And you mentioned, like your serious doctor, role, and that was one of them, was where you had to, I've actually run into something called the yips in a couple of different contexts. There was one mentioned in Brockmire. I've just got to wonder if that was something that was just completely made up, or if it's colloquial, or when you read that, was it like, oh, okay, well, this is something that obviously happens all the time. It's a psychological condition I can expound upon.
It was just one of those things where I don't know that this is a fact because I'm not a doctor, but it sounds like it sounded plausible to me, and I have to believe that it is in order to say the line. Mm-hmm. So that was just a simple thing. I do remember one thing about that, shooting that show, was that was one of the few times that I very, very tiny changed the line, and nobody bothered me about it. Because I think I just repeated a line just because it felt more natural coming out of my face. I said, I've studied a dozen of these cases, and every one of them, concert pianist and somebody else, every single one of them, I just repeated that phrase, every one of them, just as kind of the way people talk.
Yeah.
It wasn't written like that. It was written more properly, but we don't always talk properly.
No, that's pretty true.
Most of the time on most of the TV shows I've been on, like certainly Aaron Sorkin's, but all the David E. Kelly shows that I did as well, they want you to say it exactly as it's written. And in fact, on one episode of The Practice, the producer came up and said, he underlined that word for a reason. So I went, oh, was I not emphasizing it enough? Okay, I got that. No, take it.
No, I understand that. And for roles where, I think this is something I've talked about as misdelivered lines is something that I kind of watched because I think I was 9 years old and it was in MASH. They had the choppers coming in. We haven't had wounded in half an hour. What is this anyway? And I was like, oh God, that's
Oh, if he wants that back.
Oh, I feel like that would have been really easy to redo properly. It's something that's in my head. And so when you get Aaron Sorkin, he's written a line that needs to be called back like in 3 scenes from now that you're not aware of because you're not in them, or like this is something, well, he told me and he's going to want like the perfect recall for that character. I completely, I can see that, but wow, that's a lot of pressure when you're also you're surrounded by people maybe you don't work with all the time, and you've got lights, and there's this guy over here right in your eye line eating a sandwich, and yeah, I can see them coming after you, but really a Ryan Murphy set, well, I think this was an early, I think you were in the second season premiere, so maybe he isn't he's maybe more worried about Vanessa Redgrave and her scenes and getting, it's like, oh yeah, Sean's over here getting the yips, we're fine.
He directed that episode, and all I remember of him really is, except that, he liked my audition and he hired me, but on the day, I just saw that episode recently, and it looks like I'm in front of a blue screen because the ocean behind me is so vivid and bright and blue, but it wasn't. We were in a house in, I think, Santa Monica, an actual house overlooking the ocean. And so that's the actual ocean behind me, even though it looks so beautiful and blue, it has to be phony. Mm-hmm. The only thing I really remember about being on the set that day, aside from Dylan Walsh being a mensch, is Ryan Murphy walking around going, yeah, I really like that lamp. Put that in my trailer, and everything like that. Yes, save that for me too.
Oh man, that guy. No, I just feel like you've gotten to work with so many people over the years and done some, I think, standout characters in roles that maybe other people would have just been something they walked in to drink a cup of coffee and left. But I think that you find a voice when you're doing. You bring a level of care to these. The storytelling is something that's so important to me. Whenever I've been on stage, I want to know what the story is that we're telling and what my role is in telling it. And I feel like when you're able to set up a good line for Richard Schiff, or you're able to just kind of drill into an actor who is just not paying attention in a way that she really ought to. Jennifer Finnegan's already moved on to the next several. She's in so many other stories, but
I have a theatrical voice, and my instrument is my instrument, but I have good articulation, and so that's a big reason why I think I get cast in the roles I get cast in. Like, for instance, I auditioned for Allison Jones, I don't know, 10 times for different shows, Freaks and Geeks, for sure. I auditioned for the pilot of The Office, and the gal who played Phyllis was in fact Allison's assistant, who was conducting and recording the auditions.
Oh, fun!
And then even during the auditions, I think Allison Jones said, "Wait, I think Phyllis would be really great," or whatever her name is. I forget what it is. But Allison has never cast in acting, so I'm not quirky enough for her, or just kind of sounding like a person who talks. I'm always a person who talks loudly and clearly. In a way that is probably not helpful to the kinds of shows that Allison Jones casts.
Oh, potentially. I mean, you're going to bring the Phil Hartman wherever you go. But, I mean, it's just, yeah. I feel like you speak to us in writings and podcasting and television from the stage. Your work is everywhere. I've seen the complete works a couple different times, but it's one that I followed. I just really love that. As a life focus goes, it feels like you chose a strong one. The Bard is ever with us. I just saw the Book of Will. Lori did. I mean, my God, this weekend the cast was they were ready. We got their closing night and they were having fun. But it feels like Shakespeare is just throughout our storytelling. It's a reference that a lot of people are going to get.
Well, interestingly, I haven't. I joined the Reduced Shakespeare Company literally 30 years ago this year in '92. We did the complete works, and then I didn't do an awful lot of Shakespeare for 20 years because we were reducing other things, and I was in LA doing lots of film and television, none of it Shakespeare. And this maybe Aaron Sorkin and David E. Kelley being the exceptions. A lot of what you get to say on these shows is hardly Shakespeare either.
No, certainly.
But knowing Shakespeare and being a playwright myself, I'm able to look at the words on the page and kind of glean why they're written in the way they're written. So I think that has helped me a lot. But I've only really double, triple, fourfold down to Shakespeare in sort of the last decade, really, 10 or 12 years. As I've just realized, wait a second, I realized the exact same thing that you just said. Shakespeare's everywhere. Yeah. Oh my goodness, Shakespeare's everywhere. And every time I turn around, I see another quote from Shakespeare in a book or on a TV show. He's an instant reference. He adds instant credibility to something. If you quote Shakespeare a lot, then whoever wrote that can go, all right, I'm smart and classy by association because I've included Shakespeare in my story. I have kind of doubled down, but also I got to that. I kind of had to. I was pivoting because I stopped working quite so much on television in LA for lots lots of reasons. Several being they were doing more reality television, so there were fewer scripted shows on TV. They were also making fewer films. So the kinds of actors who would get supporting roles in films were now getting guest star roles in television. So they were taking roles away from people like me. Also, I had played so many doctors and lawyers, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I'm sure all the casting people in LA went, yeah, we've seen that. Let's get somebody new. And then my wife says, of course, honey, you're getting old. Your hair is turning gray. I got to that awkward age where I was too old to play a lawyer, but too young to play a judge.
I should let you mention, you're doing the Shakespeareans, something that's an ongoing project with yours. You just started out.
Yeah, I'm coaching actors. I'm helping writers develop some of their work into plays or articles or novels. In fact, I think one of my clients is publishing a novel in May, I think. So that's been really fun. I mean, I've been around the block, so I know one or two things.
For sure.
So it's fun to, it's fun to give back. I had a lot of experienced people when I was young, growing up, trying to figure stuff out, give me their wisdom. And so, so I'm sharing my wisdom in air quotes with whoever I can.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that comes through. I just wanted to say you're a gentleman, you're a scholar, you're the fool who speaks truth to power when no one else can. And from a perch struck 400 years agone, you weekly more brightly illuminate the world. And apart from the storyteller in your own right, I just wanted to thank you so much again for your time tonight, Austin, and wish you well on your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been fun. I did a deep dive into things that happened 20 years ago, but I do like talking about the process. I mean, I use all this stuff when I'm teaching young acting students now.
No, I appreciate it. Austin Titchener, everyone.
Thank you, Austin. Breezing right along on topic, I mentioned our upcoming Capital Shakespeare production of The Merry Wives of Windsor under the direction of Aaron Weichel. If you are in any way able to, I want to invite you to join us near the Heritage Center on the grounds of the North Dakota State Capitol on the evenings of July 20th to 24th, starting at 7 p.m. There's no cost for admission. A free will offering will be collected. And for more information, please check the website at Capital, with an O like the building, at Capital Shakespeare, all one word, .org. We hope to see you there if it's in any way possible. And with that, thank you so much for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com. And for past episodes, add, subscribe, and follow VideoFuzzy everywhere you get podcasts. The feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog and podcast sites, via email to tjaman1970 at yahoo.com, or through my VideoFuzzy pages on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or follow me at TJ VideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing! It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find it together on VideoFuzzy.